Here we are for another round of the 70s versus the 90s, and it's a snobs versus slobs golf tournament when I put Harold Ramis's Caddyshack against Ron Shelton's Tin Cup. And man, this one was a fun one to get through because I mean, both of these movies, of course, they're about golf. And who'd have thought like golf would have had such good movies, and yet again, what I love doing about the 70s versus the 90s is, sometimes I get surprised. I sometimes I know what's gonna win. Sometimes I don't have a fucking clue what's gonna win. And this one I was pretty sure of and it really surprised me. So let's just dive right on in to the nitty and the picky. First up, we have Harold Ramis's Caddyshack, which is a comedy classic. I mean, quite possibly, it might be the best movie about golf, but it's definitely the funniest. And this was Harold Ramis's directorial debut. Of course, he had did some writing and stuff. He was one of the writers on Animal House, and the film has a cast of some really funny motherfuckers. I mean, you got Chevy Chase and the guy who replaced him on Saturday Night Live, Bill Murray. And of course Rodney Dangerfield, who's fucking hilarious as hell, and Ted Knight, who's a little unhinged, and that unhinged shit is what makes for some comedy gold. And you got, the basically the film is pretty simple. It takes place at a country club called Bushwood. And the story mostly centers around this young kid, he's about to go off to college. He's trying to figure out his life, played by Michael O'Keefe. His name is Danny, and he's a caddy, and he's just trying to win. He's got a chick he's seeing, and they banging and all this shit, and he's trying to get this scholarship, so he's like kissing the ass of Judge Smales, played by Ted Knight, who's an uptight cocksucker, the epitome of the type of motherfucker that you would see at a country club and shit. And there's a lot of funny moments too. One of the most iconic funny moments being when they throw that baby Ruth in the pool and everybody thinks it's a turd and everybody just goes crazy. A little bit of a Jaws reference there because they feel think it's a motherfucking shark or some shit where people rag little shit in the pool. It's not even any Bill Murray eats it. It's all right. It's a Babe Ruth. All that shit. And Bill Murray is absolutely hilarious in this film as a groundskeeper who's chasing a gopher that's tearing up the golf course and stuff. And he steals the show every time he's on the screen. His just weird mannerisms and stuff. And of course, Chevy Chase is kind of phoning it in. He's doing his normal Chevy Chase thing. But the real funny motherfucker here is Rodney Dangerfield. Every time he's on the screen, he's just so garish and rude, crude, and socially unacceptable. He really shakes it up, because he's a rich developer and he goes to this country club and, just talks shit and fucks with these little uptight, uh, rich motherfuckers. And it's fucking hilarious, "Oh, somebody step on a duck," all that fucking shit. And really, like, there's a lot of golf in the film, but the movie really isn't that much about golf. It's really more about, just get sexual exploits and all kinds of other fucking crazy comedy, like shit with the boats, pretty wild and stuff. Fucking wrecks that dude's boat, puts the fucking anchor through it and shit. And all in all, like it's a fun movie. Like every time you watch it, it's a fun time. And of course, you got that Kenny Loggins song, "I'm alright," little gopher dancing to it and shit. Definitely a fun movie. And of course, it ends with a friendly golf bet. It's just the snobs versus the slobs, so to speak. And I should have stayed home and played with myself. But then and then Danny ends up winning it for him. Because the fucking Bill Murray trying to blow up the golf course and shit with to kill the gopher and shit. Still don't kill that motherfucker. The gopher is a fucking beast of nature and still dancing to Kenny Loggins. But like I said, it's a fun movie. And then we move on to Ron Shelton's Tin Cup. Now, this is the Costner leg, another Costner leg of the 70s versus the 90s. And thing about Kevin Costner, the motherfucker will surprise you. You know, Ron Shelton, of course, is the Sam Peckinpah of sports movies. And he did another film with Kevin Costner, and that is Bull Durham, which is quite possibly the greatest baseball movie of all time. And I had never seen Tin Cup, and upon watching Tin Cup, it's kind of on a level with Bull Durham, you know, like you can tell like Kevin Costner is definitely an actor that Ron Shelton can work with, you know, cuz like he's the title character Tin Cup, and he's, you know, they out in West Texas on a driving range, you know, he's a golf pro, but you know, he can't get out of his own way. You know, the dude's really good at the game, but he's even better at fucking himself up, you know, cuz he's a little crazy, unhinged and shit, but he's a hell of a striker, driver, whatever the hell they call that shit. I sure as hell don't know golf terms and shit, but his life gets shaken up when he fucking meets this shrink played by the lovely Renee Russo. And you know, she turns his life upside down because he thinks he's falling in love and shit, you know. And then he come to find out she's banging his like, I don't know if you'd call it a rival, but they know each other, and you know they just play David, played by Don Johnson, who's, you know, he's an exceptional sleaze in the film and shit. You also got Cheech Marin, who plays Kevin Costner's friend in the film, and also his caddy and stuff, and their friction is really good too. But basically, Tin Cup gets his set on a journey of like proving himself and trying to earn the love of Rene Russo's character. So he decides to, after running as David's caddy and fucking that up and shit, and then a few other mishaps here and there, he decides that he's gonna, you know, get in the U.S. Open and beat David at his own game and stuff. And you know, the thing about Tin Cup is like it's very gritty and it's very funny too. You know, or grungy, I guess, would be more the apt term. And this is one of the better Kevin Costner performances. And I'm not a big Costner guy, but you know, he really owns in this movie. There's a lot of funny moments and shit, especially when he's, you know, trying to get therapy and stuff, and the stuff. And Rene Russo is so fucking hot in this movie. You know, it's a great ass. But anyways, and like her character too is, you know, she's not just some ditz. You know, she's tough, but you know, of course, she is a little enamored with the Costner. You know, and she basically kind of helps him along the same way that Cheech Marin does. He gets to the U.S. Open, and you know, he doesn't win, but he does, you know, he has a good memorable shot and everything, and people, he'll, you know, he can still kind of have a career in it, you know, but it's very much kind of a Peck and Paul esque ending, where it's like you don't really win, but you know, you do something type thing. You know, he gets the girl in the end. Of course, it's a Costner movie. He's going, well, not all the time. Costner didn't always get the girl. You know, look at Revenge. But it's definitely a film that surprised me. I didn't expect to like this movie as much. And I have to say, I think it might be a better movie than Caddyshack. Mind you, I don't think it's funnier than Caddyshack. But if we're going laughs per minute, Caddyshack fucking crushes. But I think Tin Cup is a better movie than Caddyshack, because thing about Caddyshack, it does have some dead space, and it's shorter than Tin Cup. Tin Cup doesn't really have any dead space. It's a fucking solid movie. Like you kind of get into it from the very start. You know, it's got a good soundtrack. You know, and it could be a Texas thing too. The fact that it does take place out in West Texas is, you know, that might be a little nostalgic for me. I don't know, but all I know is I got to give this round to Tin Cup, much to my surprise, and probably to all you motherfuckers' surprise out there. Because, one, like I said, I think it's a better movie. You know, not funny. Now, Caddyshack is funnier, but there's no dead space in Tin Cup, and there's a lot of heart to it. You know, like I said, this might be Ron Shelton's best movie since Bull Durham. Like nothing's gonna beat Bull Durham. You know, that's just a given. But he has that magic that him and Costner had in Bull Durham, and of course Cheech Marin's great in it. Rene Russo, like everybody is holding their own. Even Don Johnson, who's playing the fucking sleaze, and of course you get to see some real life golf pros in this movie too. It's a real delight. It's a great movie. So this round goes to Tin Cup. And for anybody keeping score, that is 98 to 81. 70s are only up by 17 now. Them 90s be surprising you with them 1-2 punches here and there. My money's still on the 70s though, but like I said, we got a long way to go before I officially pick a winner. And of course, as when it comes to Costner, the very last episode of this insanity is going to be Heaven's Gate versus Dances with Wolves, and that's way down the line because once I do that, I'm gonna never want to watch movies again. But until then, I'm still on a very long, self-indulgent journey to figure out which decade was better for movies, the 70s or the 90s. And if I've said anything wrong, anything you disagree with, feel free to eviscerate me in the comments. I don't really give a fuck, but I will respond to all of it because you know what? I have no life. That's why I keep doing all these matchups and stuff. And you know, this is a bonus round. Main events always happen on Saturday. Like I said, I got so many of them. If I got free time, I'm doing them. You know, so just keep swinging because life is definitely throwing you some shit.